Airport team who supported a lot despite having a very busy day tomorrow, because some of you might have heard that His Majesty the King is visiting tomorrow. So thanks a lot for still taking the time for us at this busy moment. And I'd also like to thank our structural sponsor, BNP Paribas Fortis Private Banking, for their continued support to INSEAD. So when we were discussing with our working group about crisis management, our first name that came on our list to say who could be an interesting speaker was Mr. Feist. And I think it's quite obvious why. Mr. Feist joined Brussels Airport in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, as CFO and ICT director. So a couple of years later, he faced the financial crisis. The very unthinkable thing of the bombings happened in 2016, and then the COVID crisis. So I think if we look at the experienced leaders we have in Belgium, unfortunately, I would say, there is nobody who has more experience in facing situations like these. And at some point, we even thought of naming the event How to Run an Airport Company When All Planes Stop Flying, which happened, I think, already twice to Mr. Feist in the meantime. So thank you for joining us for the debate. On the other side, we have Ludo van der Heijden. For the INSEAD alumni, Ludo doesn't need an introduction. A lot of us have had his classes, I think, mainly in operations management. Ludo has been elected best teacher a number of times by the students. But Ludo is also responsible for the Center for Corporate Governance, has written a number of papers on crisis management, and also knows the other side of the medal, I would say, as he is director in a number of companies and chairman as well of a number of companies. So he knows the academic side, but also very clearly the business side of this equation. So Ludo will have the discussion with Arnaud. What is the concept of tonight? Ludo and Arnaud will talk for about 30-35 minutes. We will monitor the Zoom, so any questions that you have, you can already list them, and we will pass them on to Ludo. The questions will be dealt with after the interview. And then we have a small interactive part at the end as well, because one of the things we always try to do in Viewpoint events is to share experiences and to share learnings. And we will have a small breakout session. Ludo will present a framework of crisis management that we can then share experiences and comment in small groups before coming back and closing. So with this, Ludo, I give the floor to you, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and you will be back. So thank you for inviting me and allowing me to take a plane yesterday. This was the first time in a year, so I was happy to fly Brussels Airlines, from Geneva to here. And I must say it was a strange experience. It sort of requires to get set up again. But of course, one still goes through an empty airport. And I was going to buy wine for my sister, but then I'd forgotten that the shops still were closed. So that finally got solved. So thank you very much for inviting me on the Belgian Alumni. Thank you for the audience. And let's start right away. I did write a paper with Peter Nathaniel, who was the Chief Risk Officer of Royal Bank of Scotland. So he restructured Royal Bank of Scotland after the financial crisis. And we wrote this paper that was nicely shared. And we the motivation for the paper was at the beginning of COVID, everybody said this is new, and we haven't seen this before, when there was SARS, when, Bill Gates had spoken about it before, etc. And I think the first point I maybe wanted to make in the paper is that, of course, every crisis is idiosyncratic in the way it emerges, in the way it starts. But they're patterns. And so the worst thing is to get into a crisis without any idea, without any learning from previous patterns. And I think that is sort of the spirit of our discussion here. And indeed, in COVID, the Asian countries had SARS, and the best countries, or the best responses initially were indeed Asian countries, because they had gone through SARS before. And so that's sort of the overall spirit of this event is what can we learn? And maybe I will start with that with Arnaud, 3 questions. You know, if we mention the three big crises that Peter mentioned that you've gone through, you know, what is it that comes to mind and that you recall? Financial crisis, what would be the key learning for you? You started at the airport. Anything that comes to mind as a recollection?
Yeah, good evening. I think it was, yes, it was the first crisis I had to manage, first as a CFO, but also became then CEO more or less at the same time. With hindsight, it was a small crisis compared to what we have been through. But it's also, for me, what I recall is how fast things go bad. And because a simple example, we had a credit rating by Standard & Poor's was very good. And in a couple of months' time, we were below investment grade. And we did not anticipate that it would go that fast, because it was a compound effect of the whole economy close to collapse, our sector being more exposed to the crisis, and in no time we were from a very nice situation, growing and nice returns, to a situation where we really had to fight, to get back on track. And I think that's right. I remember that as it went much faster than we anticipated.
And how did you then finally recover, or what was the turning point there?
Well, it was probably because they appointed a new CEO.
Yeah.
No, joke aside,
sure.
No, but we really went through the whole company. We put up in place what we call the remedial action plan, where I asked basically all the stakeholders to contribute. It was really quite comprehensive package involving, of course, the employees, and we had to lay off some people, but also our suppliers, our partners, and our shareholders. And I think that's, in my view, that's the way we managed to get out of this crisis, having everyone to contribute. And by the very fact that the others were contributing, everybody more or less accepted to make sacrifices. It was to have a balanced approach, and not only say, okay, we have to lay off people, but the shareholders don't contribute. It was the comprehensive approach, including our suppliers, including our clients.
Very good. And then, of course, there's this terrible crisis as well, which is the terrorism, the 2016. What comes to mind, and what sort of what feelings does it bring? I mean, terrible feelings, but also what learnings does it bring to you, and how did you cope?
Yeah, it's a huge emotional shock, and it will always remain like that for I think all the people who have been involved, because suddenly, also as a CEO, you are leading a company where people were killed by terrorists. I mean, in a very awful way. So it's really a huge shock. But what I will always remember is the solidarity of the teams, of the people beyond our company, because there are more than 300 companies here at the airport. But the way the whole community acted as one, actually as one family, I could even say, because there were no boundaries anymore between companies. Everybody was working with everybody just to get out of this crisis. And I think that's the one thing, if you ask me, there are many other things, but that's the one thing that comes to my mind, is how we have been able to go out of this crisis thanks to this solidarity, this also the agility of the people. It was just amazing.
And is that crisis still present today in some ways, or did you sort of close the chapter and you took the lessons and
I think in terms of pure the business, I mean, 6 months after the attack, we were back on our record level. So it went quite fast. We managed to recover very, very quickly. But of course, it still remains, a very emotional memory for all the people who were there at that moment. So it still remains, as a shock, but also as a learning for what we have been able to do as a team. I think it just shows the strength of the people together. United we stand stronger. That was clearly our leitmotif at that moment. I think it's been really, really clear to all of us what we could achieve, and it's also, something that we have remembered in this crisis, because we knew we had gone through hell in 2016. So we knew we could get out of this, and I think that's really helped us in this crisis.
So the confidence building, and the togetherness.
Absolutely.
Very good. And then COVID, what comes to mind? I mean, if I recall the INSEAD experience, we were going to close courses for 3 weeks, 3 months, and now we're thinking about opening maybe face-to-face in next January. So what is the recollection for you, you know, in terms of, was it a slow decay? Was it a sudden shock? What?
I remember actually when it at least first started to be on my radar screen. I was actually in Switzerland in on a ski holiday at the end of February, and then I was hearing the news, and I called my CFO and said, look, we may have a problem here. It will probably hit us, in a few months' time. And then by the time I was back in Belgium a week later, I mean, we were really already nearly in the first lockdown, and in a few weeks' time, really 2 weeks' time, we lost 99.5% of our traffic. I think that it was very sudden, very, very heavy, very hard, and that's amazing. When you look at the chart, it's just nearly down to zero. We decided to remain open, actually, basically to allow for the repatriation flights. A lot of Belgians were abroad; they had to come back. A lot of foreigners in Belgium had to fly back home. So we said we keep that open. Also, we have the cargo activity, very important for medical supplies, masks, and so on. But that was also, when you think about it, you have an airport, which was quite a significant infrastructure company, basically close to standstill, but we're still open. So of course your cost base is quite fixed for an airport, so the losses are quite huge.
And how did you manage the financial side?
Well, the first thing is, and maybe that's one of the learnings of this crisis, probably as in the previous crisis, was, don't take anything for granted. I remember on the financial side, one of the first questions we had in our executive team was, well, do we have enough financial means? Do we have enough cash? Sure. In this situation, cash is king. And we said, well, we have some cash, it's nice. We have, very significant credit lines. And we thought for a couple of days, we are fine. And until we realized, well, what will happen to the financial markets? It's fine to have a credit line, but if the financial markets are closed, you can forget it. And so very quickly, we drew down on all our credit lines. We're not the only one, but we said, let's take all the money and just to be on the safe side. And that would give us a sort of, call it a cushion, or at least a comfort to say, we have enough cash to survive this crisis. If it lasts 1, 2, 3, whatever years, of course, if it's permanent, it's a big problem. But that gives us a bit of comfort, quote unquote, in a very uncomfortable situation.
And what is sort of, if you go back, what is your biggest pride, in terms of, hopefully we'll get through a good summer. I know, that people are waiting for a good summer, especially in the restaurant, Horeca, same for you. But if you look back, what is your biggest pride, if you would say? What did you and the team, the executive team, did well?
I think when I look at, at the last 15 months, I think I'm really proud of again, back to the people, the teamwork. I mean, we have seen again what we had seen in 2016. It's great people, great teamwork, people really going, the extra mile to make things happen. And that, I think, was for me, that's really something to be proud of, the way all the teams have worked so hard. But also realizing that, we have been in a situation where a lot of our people were on temporary unemployment at home, not doing anything, wanted to come back. We had a number of people here having a lot of things to do, overloaded. So we also had quite a difficult balance to manage between people overloaded here and people, doing nothing at home and really wanted to come back. So that's also something which has been interesting and challenging to manage.
And we all know the airport, of course. We've gone through it, and we know where the taxis drop us or the bus arrives, and then we know the Balis, where you check in, and the airplanes. But if we mention Brussels Airport Company, what should people know that they don't know? What's sort of the hidden phase of the airport, which actually you're dealing with and your team is dealing with?
Basically, the company that I'm leading is owner of, I would say, nearly all buildings, land, everything that you see at the airport, more or less, is from us, and we coordinate the activity of, I mentioned, more than 300 companies that are active at the airport. There are 24,000 people working here on the site in Zaventem, so it's a lot of people, and we are a bit the maestro and the chef d'orchestre of all the whole community. With a leading role on the way to go ahead to organize, the development of the site and the different development of our activities.
So actually, I hear that I think some accounting firms are actually opening up offices on the premises. So actually, soon people will be more important than the airplanes. That the airplanes will be a way to attract offices, and you will no longer go to DGEM or around, but you will want to be located at the airport. Is that a new development, or is that a new trend?
Well, it's actually we developed a new strategy several years ago, and when we realized, okay, we need to go beyond just being an airport, but we need to become we call it an economic center, where of course you have an airport, yes, but you have all sorts of different activities. And we have a business district, indeed, because we have Deloitte has been here for several years. We have KPMG, Microsoft, and a number of other companies that have moved their offices to the airport. I would say not so much because of the airplanes, but more about because of the train station, because of the bus connections. Because we, in 1958, when the airport opened, we were the first airport in the world with its own train station, and we still have it. We have a lot of bus movements every day. With the ring not far from the airport, we have parking. So it's basically this internal hub that is very attractive to a number of these companies. And in our strategic review years ago, we said, okay, this is one of the areas where we want to develop business districts, so attracting companies that are not necessarily aviation related, but just say, I want to be at the airport because it's dynamic, because it's well connected, because it is convenient, and we have quality offices. Next to that, we also have in our strategy the development of logistics, where we are investing a lot in the development of logistics at the so-called Blue Cargo, which is the cargo area of the airport. And again, it goes beyond just simply air freight. It's just also logistics for goods that have to be dispatched by truck to different locations, or between this airport and other airports by truck. And I think these are really developments that we have started several years ago, and that really have proven to be going in the right direction. Unfortunately, we are not far enough yet in these developments to be able to weather down the current crisis, because most of our revenues are still related to passengers.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in crisis, experience is invaluable. Is that you don't want to learn through failing, or you don't want to learn through crisis. What are some of the learnings that you have learned, and that you now remember, that you would like to share with the audience? Say, I've gone through crises. There are 3 things I would like to share with you. And I had to learn it through my own, school of hard knocks or whatever.
Well, one of the things that I think I've learned is, the true leaders really emerge in crisis periods. And referring, for instance, to what happened in 2016, is we have seen a number of leaders emerge from the ranks, if you want. People which have not really been noticed for being really leaders, and suddenly comes a crisis, and they reveal themselves. They show skills, leadership skills that you would dream of. Mm-hmm. And I think that was for me was a very interesting learning. That of course you have to manage them, because after the crisis, these people have shown what they can do. Is what do you do with them? You don't send them back to their desk. Say, okay, nice, thank you. You go back to your previous job. So we tried also to give perspectives, career perspectives to those people. But probably a second learning I would like to share is communication. Communication is key. And it's been true in 2016. It's true today, probably even more. Is you have to communicate, and make sure that you find the right channels to communicate. This crisis, it was for me personally probably a challenge in terms of communication, because it's a very volatile crisis, a volatile situation. It's a VUCA type of crisis where everything changes every second day. And when I communicate, I like to communicate things that I know and
stable cash
stable.
flows,
And I say, well, this is the way we are going. The direction is where we are going to. And I remember the first sessions where we communicated, of course, through Skype or Zooms and so on with the whole company. And I was saying something on the Monday, and on the Wednesday I had to go back and say, sorry, it's changed. And in the beginning, I was rather frustrated. Sorry, I don't like that. But actually, there was no other way. And I think I realized that as soon as you're authentic, transparent, you explain what you know, but also what you don't know. And dare to say, well, I don't know. Because people are saying, when will this crisis be over? When will you fire people? And so on. At some point, you have to be honest and say, look, I just don't know. Yeah. I cannot give you the answers. So you have to accept that yes, this is a very volatile situation. So please be patient, and I'll share that with you as soon as I can. And I was quite pleased, but because we do some pulse survey from asking the organization what they think about a number of things, and they thought that my communication was very trustworthy, and 90% of the people.
And did you always have this, or did you sort of learn it, as a result of, or did you refine your skills and your competences about being authentic, or this is the crisis reveals who you are, and I think you shouldn't hide too much.
No, I had inside me, but just the fact that probably I've shown it more than before, because it was really required in these circumstances. Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Let's go a little bit to the diagnosis. Yourself, tired, energized, looking for a vacation.
All of that.
Okay. Your team. How would you
I think that the team. We look at the leadership team. I think they've done a great job. First of all, we had to let go, about 20% of our leadership team.
How many employees do you have? Actually, this would be interesting for audience to know.
In our own company, we are about 1,100 before the crisis. So we are now 16-17% less than what we were at the beginning of the crisis.
And was it sort of, everybody sort of, let's reduce proportionally, 10% each function, or some to
No, we really look at the functions.
Better hits.
We look at the functions which we thought were not necessary or needed in the next 12 to 18 months. That was a bit, the test that we did.
And where was the axe the hardest?
A lot of project managers had to go, because we were in a very expensive phase before the crisis. We have a lot of investments, construction projects, of course, with a lot of people active in project management. Of course, we had to scale down a number of our projects, so we let a number of people go, and then different functions a bit here and there. But the bulk came from our project teams. But it was also, it started with the leadership team where we thought, okay, we have to let a number of these people go. Unfortunately, obviously it hurts, but it was necessary.
Could you keep the executive team, or were there changes there as well?
No, we could keep the executive team.
People.
No, we kept the executive team. Actually, I already reduced the executive team before the crisis for the reasons. So we had I think there was a CEO plus 6 members of the executive team, and we think that's the right number to manage the company even in a crisis period.
And what is your view of the partners, the 300 companies, the airlines? In what shape are they? Some people must be quite critical. Some people probably already have closed down.
Well,
how is the system?
You have two groups. You have the companies that are active in the passenger segment, and then you have the companies that are active in the cargo segment. And I think you start with the cargo. Cargo is booming. So these companies, they are fully loaded. They are really, really busy. The thing about, I mentioned the pharmaceutical products, the vaccines. We are obviously shipping a lot of vaccines every day or every week, but also e-commerce. We have DHL. Very much present here, and their business is booming. So that's I think those companies are in that segment are doing well, or very well. And then I think the other segment, the passenger segment, is suffering. I mean, we had one big bankruptcy. Swissport, one of the two handlers went bust, leaving 1,500 people without a job. There have been a number of restructuring, whether it's Brussels Airlines or in the duty-free shops or in the parkings, in our company. So a lot of companies have had to reduce their workforce by anything between 15 and 30%, depending on their situation. So it has been a hard hit. About 4,000 jobs have gone here on the site. We normally have 24,000. We've lost about 4,000. So it's quite significant. But it's scattered in many companies. So except for Swissport, which was a big chunk, but otherwise it's 100 people there, 100 people there over there.
And what is your message on the restaurant business? You know, that's a big part of the airport. How is that, you know, going? Because that must be suffering terribly.
Well, the restaurant is obviously they've been many of them have been closed. Although I think we always managed to keep a couple of restaurants open.
Yeah.
Where there was an exception in the law for the airport. We could keep one restaurant open in each pier, and I think we are very pleased today that they are reopening. You know, as from today, they are reopened. I think that's going to be a relief for all the travelers, because you said you just flown back from Geneva and you thought the airport was empty.
Yeah.
It's empty because it's big, because we had 15,000 passengers yesterday, but it looks empty. But what we're really working hard on with all our partners is to reopen restaurants, to reopen shops. So it looks like, you know, I would say a normal airport environment. And we know that the passengers are gradually coming back. So I think it was a positive dynamic.
On this point, and while I'm asking, I'm going to ask Peter maybe to look at some of the questions, so that Peter, if it's okay, maybe I'll come to you in a few minutes with some questions from the audience. What is your expectations for the summer? Like, you know, what would you like to see and you're preparing for? What would be a dream outcome, and what would be a real tough summer, and then really disappointing and really problematic?
Yeah, currently we're about, I would say, 15-16% of our normal activity. If you look at the number of passengers, we are 15-16% of what we had in the same period in 2019. We expect this to grow progressively towards the end of June, which really the kickoff of the summer season. Yeah. Our expectation, I would say, call it the base case, would be around 40% of the normal traffic in July, August, representing about 2.5 million passengers over the 2 months. Normally, we would be above 5.5 million, but that, I think, would be a good case, a good evolution. I would say anything above that
is gravy.
Well, yes and no. I mean, because we have a challenge. I think the challenge here is the recovery itself.
Yeah. When
you have such a system, you know, which is quite a complex system with many different processes, you know, you have to restart it progressively. You have to make sure that all, you know, the steps in the chain, in the logistics chains, do work as they should. And so we have to test everything about the baggage system. The system has not been, you know, running really for about 15 months. We have a system with more than 6,000 engines, so we have to test everything. So I think the fact that it's progressive is actually a good thing. So we can test everything, make sure everything is working smoothly. We also have to understand that with the new documents, you know, the European COVID certificate that's going to be issued very soon, you know, it's a new step in the process. How are these certificates going to be controlled? What will be the impact on the queuing time? Because if, you know, everybody has to be checked, we have a PCR test, we have a certificate, and so on. So we will need to adapt all our processes to the new situation. So I would say 50%, 40-50% is probably the best outcome. I think below that, of course, it would be difficult. But I mean, the expectation is really that we will actually we'll see a lot of passengers. That's what we see in the bookings. A lot of people
want to travel,
really wanting to travel. They've not been able to do so for 15 months, and I think the prospects are quite positive.
And the variant, the Delta variant, the fourth wave, is how do you manage that possibility, or how does that enter into the planning?
Well, I think the fact is, you know, the key is vaccination. And so far, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a doctor, and my understanding is that the vaccines do work for the known variants at this stage, and that means that it would still be possible to travel again in even if there is a new variant, but that's going to be, of course, the big question mark for the coming months. I'm optimistic by nature, so I'm hoping that this will go in the right direction.
I have two questions here from Martin. When will be able to travel to the US? This is also a question for me. I have a daughter in Brooklyn, and we're trying to think of, should she come here or should we plan to go there?
That's a $1 million question. I get it every second day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to say. What we know is at this stage is not possible, to travel to the US for non-essential reasons. I think the Americans are very clear on that. We know that there are negotiations between Europe and the US to find an agreement, and it probably a sort of reciprocity agreement, so that Europeans would be allowed to fly to the US if they are vaccinated and so on. So I think the first step is to get this European, COVID certificate, and that's coming from 1st of July, and then to get that certificate recognized by the US and vice versa. So my guess, and it's really a wild guess, would be sometime by the end of July, if everything goes according to plan. But it could be.
We should be able to travel by.
That's my guess.
That's your best guess.
It's my 5 cents on the issue.
Mm-hmm. And also a question from Martin: how did your shareholders, and I saw that on the website, your shareholders were pension funds largely together, you told me, with the Belgian government, who's still 25% shareholder.
Yeah.
What is the feedback from the shareholders? Are they nervous, or are they long-term investors as pension funds, and they say, Arnaud, you're doing great, keep going, and...
Yeah, I mean, we are an infrastructure company, so we are by definition long-term. So you invest in a pier, you invest in runways for 50, 60, 70 years. So the good thing is we have pension funds as shareholder and the Belgian state, and they also have a long-term view.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of alignment there.
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody likes, what's happening in many companies on the financial side. We have lost about 150 million euro in 2020. But there is no real nervousness. Of course, they pay a lot of attention to the development, but they have full confidence in the management to solve the current situation and go out of the crisis. Also with a view on the future, because maybe that's one also going back to the lessons learned. Is you have to think about the future. You cannot just focus on the current crisis, the day to day. You also have to have people thinking about how are we going to emerge from this crisis in a good shape, quote unquote. And I think that's what we did in 2016. We had two teams. One was focused on the very day-to-day issues, and the other one was focusing on the exit of the crisis and the future. And I think that's what we're also working on today is the future. And I think an important thing for us is what I call the build back better. We don't want to just go back to the normal as it was before the crisis. We really want to take this opportunity, to rebuild our sector in a different way. Climate change is still a problem. It's a huge problem. Right or wrong, the aviation has been, in the spotlight for CO2 emissions, although it's quite limited. It's 2 to 3% of the CO2 emissions coming from aviation. I'm not saying it's good, but I think we need to do our homework as an industry, and I think this is for me an opportunity to speed things up.
Yeah, and this is a big question. It's also a question from Henri, environmental, and also with the young talent. How do you maintain the young talent, going forward, and how do you build better and, for the future? What specifically is your message on environmental?
Well, we take it broadly on what we call sustainability, where we say, look, sustainability has been a priority for us already for about 10 years, because I'm personally convinced and very respectful for the planet. And that's one of the first things I did when I was appointed CEO. I said, look, I want to make this business greener. So we embarked on a program to become CO2 neutral, and it took us about 7 years to reach it in 2018. So the airport is CO2 neutral for its own operations.
And how did you manage that? What were the big decisions or changes that you had to make?
The first point was to understand and accept that it's more expensive. And the discussion we had with our board and with our shareholders, okay, as just an example, green electricity. Okay, we buy 100% green electricity. It's a bit more expensive. Okay. We've built our own water treatment plant. Okay, that's not on CO2, but just to show you. So we invest in sustainability. We built our solar panel farms. So we have several farms at the airport. We integrate sustainability in all our projects.
From and in all your investments.
Exactly, and that makes it probably a bit more expensive, but not so much. Because if you come at the end of the process, say, I want to be greener, then you have it's more expensive.
And what do you see to be the benefit? Not that I'm cynical, but just to hear it out.
Well, because we are convinced we have a sort of responsibility, a societal responsibility that goes beyond just being a private company. So we really want to be a good corporate citizen, and I really believe personally in that. And I was very pleased to see that this was also supported by the leadership team. So that's the first thing. So we have to invest in there because we are here for the long term. Our routes are here, our runways are here. We're not going to move away in the next 50 years. So we better, have
Get
a
it
plan
in the right shape, yeah.
because we need to reduce the impact of our industry on the environment, and that we have been doing that consistently. Then second point, maybe to the second part of your question,
yeah, sorry,
if I may, sorry, because it's also important for our employer branding. To attract young talents, you need to show that you are serious about sustainability, and we have I think a strong track record, and that's something that really we hear also from the young talents that we recruit. Is that's one of the things that is attractive for them.
The noise and the pollution, is that now pretty much under control? I mean, at some point there was a lot of noise, especially with DHL and location of cargo at night and things like that. Do you master that now, or is that still going to come back? Is that part of the future challenges?
Well, today, as we speak,
today
noise is not a problem.
Yeah.
but I think we have to put things back in context. At the peak of Sabina in 2000, we had 325,000 flights per year, 325,000. 2019, so pre-crisis, we were at 235,000. So let's say about 30% less flights. But we have, 15% more traffic, 15% more passengers. Why? Because the planes are bigger than they were 15 years or 20 years ago, and they have a higher seat load factor. And that means basically that we can grow our activity, in terms of passenger transport, without necessarily growing the impact on the environment. And I think that's very important for us. So when we asked the University of Leuven and also Ghent to look at the impact of these flights on the population, what we see is that compared to 2000, we are at about minus 50% in terms of number of people potentially impacted by the flights, because there are far less flights, and the planes today make less noise, they pollute less, they still pollute too much. I agree. But the noise impact has been reduced compared to what it was 20 years ago.
Some questions still about the crisis. Question from Lionel. New true leaders reveal themselves in a crisis. What did you do with existing leaders, who didn't, or basically people who didn't match up to the leadership challenge?
I will not talk to the current crisis because we're still in there, so I don't want to make anybody nervous. But what we did in after 2016 is clearly on one hand to recognize the new leaders that have emerged from this crisis and give them the chance to get promotions or to do different things, to really give them the opportunity to show their leadership skills. And I think a number of leaders that have not been up to the challenge, I think have left the company or have taken different positions, probably less of a leadership role. Maybe some have moved to expert roles. So we have had to do both.
And in the crisis, obviously, cash flow is a big issue. You don't want to send the cash out with bonuses. Do you motivate people differently by talking more with people? By walking around more, by having more one-on-one, maybe by Zoom? Is sort of personal engagement on your part, on the executive team, a way of keeping people motivated? And then also recognizing who's stronger on the team, because you're closer to them.
Yes. No, indeed. In such a crisis, like this one, you don't have that much margin in terms of money because you're saving everywhere. So it would be a bit strange to start giving bonus to people and salary increase. So it's not possible. But what we did is we did a comprehensive review of our management and our leadership team and understanding, who are the key people. How do we reward talents? How do we reward performance in a different way? Now it can be career paths, it can be training, it can be opportunities to do different things, to scope and to enlarge the scope. of some people. So we have had quite a number of different initiatives to keep the talented people motivated without necessarily giving them money. Because I'm also convinced, okay, money is fine and salary is necessary, but it doesn't really motivate in the medium to long term. We know salary increase motivates people for 3 months, 5 months,
and then you have to go back to it.
And you have to go back. So it doesn't really help, especially when you don't have enough financial headroom to do it. But taking care of people, showing them some perspectives, making them work on new things, different things, I think has been very effective.
And will one of the lasting effects of COVID be that part-time employment, you can get off for 3 months if you want to, you can work at home? How do you see that on the nature of work? Because people have been working, managers especially have been working at home a lot. And
yeah, a lot of people have been working at home. We still have a lot of people in temporary employment as we speak. Yeah? We probably more than 20% of our people are to some extent temporary and employed. We are pulling them back as fast as we can because a lot of people really want to come back and are really pushing us to say they want to come back. But so basically what we see, there will be an impact. Home working is going to be, we can't avoid it. We had a home working policy before the crisis. I'm quite sure, and we are actually working on the new home working policy because, we feel the need. And I think it can be very effective, but it has some wide-ranging implications. It's not just to say you're going to work from home 3 days a week or 2 days a week. It's to say, how do you monitor and manage performance? Because you go very much into a sort of different way of managing performance. You're results-based, results-oriented. You say, hey, you're not going to be in the office. We'll give you much more autonomy, but then we will measure your performance on results.
And how do you do that?
Well, we are right in the middle of it. Okay. So I will not give you the answer right now. But for some people, they love it. Some of the people, then they react very differently. Well, I'll probably come back to the office, depending on the profile of the people, also depending on the functions. But we have embarked on a quite interesting journey to do that, to see the different types of profiles and find the right approach. There's no one size fits all.
But do you see more diversity in the way you will employ people, giving people more choices, more opportunities, more variable load, etc.?
We'll have to definitely change that. What we see also is that for quite many people, they work more from home.
So you would say productivity improvement?
Yeah, productivity improvement because they save time on the road. Yeah. But also, and that's also something to be very careful with, is they are always connected. So how do you avoid burnouts? Because people are just all the time on their computers.
And are you now giving instructions saying cut off, give yourself a break?
We have already told them we are going to, as part of a home working policy, say, hey, be careful, don't overdo it. I'm not a big fan of restricting things. We could say we switch off the email system at some time during the day or during the night. I'm not sure it's my style to impose these things, but at least making people aware of this is important. And of course, as part of the people management, watching for burnout signals and trying to avoid that.
What would you say is the percentage of people that you feel are close to burnout, or in the orange zone? So they're not really red, but
I can't give you a number. I think what we see is we have some case of burnouts. We have, and that's the difficulty is what I was referring to earlier in the discussion. We have a limited number of burnouts, but also a number of bore-outs. People staying home, fed up, staying home with their beloved children and wife in a 2-bedroom apartment.
It even happened to Bill Gates.
Yeah, exactly. So it's also something to watch out. To make sure that people don't get this bore out. We have had some cases and people desperate to come back to the office. Now, as from now, there is some possibilities, but it's really a point of attention for us.
I'm going to have a couple of quick questions before we start a little bit the group work, if that's okay, and present the crisis management framework. Very quickly, what do you expect from a board in times of crisis? And what did you get?
Well, what I expect is of course, is full support to the management. What we need is probably one. If you look at the lessons learned and all, at least the one thing that I think has been important is aligning all the internal stakeholders.
Did the board meetings change? Do you feel closer to the board now? And what is the thing that they did well, and what is the one thing you wish they had done a little bit more?
I think
you don't need to answer the second question.
I was not planning to. No, I think the meeting, of course, are different because, of course, they are also a conference call or Skypes or Zooms or whatever. So it's also a different dynamic because when you normally have a board meeting, a lot of things happen in the corridor and not in the meeting itself. So now we obviously have to do it differently. But I think that we have had this very similar type of board meetings in terms of numbers. We have had probably 1 or 2 board meetings more than in a normal year. Obviously, especially at the beginning of the crisis, but I think the board has been supportive and also understanding, that it's a complex situation and the solution is not necessarily restructuring, and as well.
So manage through,
it's just to say, look, we are here for the long term. Of course, you have to save costs in the short term, but you don't want to kill your company so that when you go out of the crisis, then you're exhausted and you have no resources, no human resource to get out of the crisis in the proper way.
Question from Edouard. Brussels Airport was investing heavily in digital before. Has that sort of stopped? Are you doing it again? Has that helped?
No, we will, of course, we put a number of our digital projects on hold. Definitely, yes. Probably the project that had not an immediate return, we put them on hold. We are still looking at which project to restart. Think about data science, clearly an area where we really want to further invest, and we are working on that because we see more and more opportunities. We keep investing in technology. We have a 5G network here. Yep. We are in very few places in Belgium where it was a private 5G network, and we're already developing new applications, for instance, with drones and 5G and so on. So we keep investing in the long-term development, also on the technology side, on digital side, because we know it's there for the long term. So we cannot just afford to waste time on that.
Related with this, a question from Bart: have you identified new opportunities for Brussels Airport in the crisis? New business opportunities or service opportunities?
Well, one thing which we have actually recently launched is a new activity called Airport Intelligence. It's a consulting activity. We have a new company, a daughter company, because what we have realized is that we were asked many times to provide advice to other airports or even outside of our sector. For instance, hospitals have contacted us to help them in terms of how to manage complex operations, how to develop operations center. So we said, look, let's try to professionalize this kind of advice into a new company. So that's one of the things very concretely that we have launched actually a month ago, which we hope will be successful.
Question from Milena and also from some others: the 3 big risks that you're trying to manage and that might keep you awake if you keep awake at night. What are the 3 big risks?
I sleep very well. That's my advantage.
Yeah. It probably helps to manage the crisis.
Yes, it does.
Because sleep deprivation is not a good way to.
You have to keep your mind clear.
Yeah.
No, the big risk, obviously the current risk, because my view is that this is not the last pandemic that we have to face, and we probably have some more in the coming years. So how to make our business more resilient to this kind of crisis, and that means also clearly looking at diversifying our revenues. We are very exposed to one segment, which is the passenger segment, which is very important. We will remain important, but how can we diversify our revenues? Then there is a second risk, which is of course a political risk about the airport is a bit of a weird animal, I would say, in Belgium. We are a federal airport. We are located in Flanders. We're very close to the Brussels capital region. So there's a lot of political discussion, and I think we need clarity about the future of this airport. I think it's in the interest of everyone, whether it's the local residents, the airlines, or the airport itself, and the thousands of people working here. We need clarity. So that's the political risk. I think these are the two big risks that I see. As I said, on climate change, of course, is a risk. There's there is that risk that the climate is changing. You could think about natural disasters that could become more frequent. Also, some further restrictions due to the climate change situations, which, as I said, we are tackling through our sustainability strategy.
Two final questions. One question is: are you going to look more? The company. Are you going to look at crisis management skills when you hire people now more so than before? Is this something on the radar screen or not? It's more, resilience and psychological self-confidence, whatever.
Oh, I think what's important for me is when we recruit people, sorry, in leadership position is agility. Being able to adapt to new situation, is resilience. Resistance to pressure is obviously key. Creativity, how do you find creative ways to solve unknown problems? I think these are key, and I think any communication is obviously key, because you need communication
good
skills
more
and more. You need to be a good communicator. There's no way around this.
So actually, it's good managers you need, and
rounded leaders,
agile,
real leaders who are agile and able to tackle this kind of crisis.
Yeah. Last question. If I'm a fan and I really want to work in an airport company, why should I join Brussels rather than Leipzig, rather than Charles de Gaulle, Schiphol, or London? What is your?
If you ask me, I'm a bit biased in this.
Yeah, but that's what we want. We want our CEOs to be biased.
No, I think we are a great company. We have a great airport. Really, it's still at human scale. We are not the huge mega hubs of Schiphol or Paris Charles de Gaulle or Frankfurt, which in my view are too big. They're good airports, but it's the fact that you need to be close to people. People need to understand your airport. When you go to these mega hubs, you never really understand. Here, I think the airport is very readable for the passengers, and I think we have this what we call the Belgian hospitality, this Belgian touch, which for us is great. We're very welcoming, and I think that makes a difference. We have nice.
So
nice
the local
touch,
which
I think, and we try to promote here at the airport now for a number of years, to say that we are not, just an international airport. There are hundreds of airports in the world. Many of them look like each other. We try and say we have a special touch, and I think we can be proud of that.
So Belgium is a key attractor. Belgium is also a key risk for the political situation at the same time. So it's hot and cold.
Well, I mean, Brussels and in particular is the capital of Europe. So it's a great, asset for us to be the airport of the capital of Europe. Belgium as such is also very interesting for us. We have a great country, to be honest, which is very open to international trade. We have a lot of export import, so a lot of things are going through our airport. Obviously, passengers, people, but also goods. So I think that's a great opportunity. Of course, we have the challenges of our institutional situation, but I think we are Belgian, so we know how to live with that.
Very good. Thank you, Arnaud, and thank you very much for all your questions. I tried to do justice to it. I didn't do it perfectly or even maybe very well, but I tried to pay attention. Thank you very much for the questions. I think we would like to also invite you to share your own experiences, because we all lived through the crisis. So it's not just Arnaud and Brussels Airport. All of us lived through the crisis, and it might be a good opportunity actually to share. This is what the INSEAD network can also bring. And I'm going to quickly show my little model that I worked with my finance colleague, and then ask whether I'm going to have a test here by the champion, whether this is a useful model. So I will go through it very, very quickly. The whole idea was that in a crisis, you need to have routines, you need to have ways of working, and that is process. And so that is very different from the typical answer that we got in the COVID, which got us annoyed, which is this is new. So when there's new, there's no process, which is you start everything from scratch. And our reaction was that's exactly the wrong thing to do, because you have a lot of experience with not the same crisis, but similar crisis. So that is the idea of the process approach, and that leads to the tripod and the cycle, the continuous learning to deal with crises, which if you stretch it goes all the way to agile management, but not agile in the sense of n'importe quoi, agile in terms of going through a sequence of steps And the steps are first to frame the crisis. What is this crisis about? Is it a sanitary crisis? Is it an economic crisis? And of course, this is the worst in the COVID. It started as a sanitary crisis, then it became a health crisis, then it became a financial crisis, then it became an economic crisis, then it became a burnout crisis. Now it's a crisis for the young people who don't go to school. So the continuous reframing of the crisis and then engaging. I think probably the biggest way, the biggest lesson for me in the US crisis, and as I said, our daughter is in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn was one of the key hotspots of COVID in the US. Engaging everybody in the right way. So, the worst thing Trump did was denying it and not engaging. It's actually disengage. And the worst thing in the crisis here is that, of course, everybody can be a carrier, everybody can be a nuisance, everybody, etc. So then, of course, risk analysis, creative analysis, options, because in a crisis you have to push buttons, and also you have to prepare. And then finally making decisions, and then setting expectations. That's the narrative, which is the worst is still to come, or things are going to get better. And then at some point go into action mode and also sanction the people who do not actually do what is supposed to. I think because that is sort of the worst, is that you're fighting a battle and then your own people who should manage actually do the wrong way. And then the pit stop, which is regular pit stop, communicating what have we learned, what are we going to change differently, also we made some mistakes, etc., etc. So that was a little bit the model. I think we're not going to go through much, and actually I'll just show a few examples. Is that things not to do, poor practices, which is not engaging people, which is just plan it, but not saying that you're planning it, or not engaging those that have expertise on it. So in a crisis, people have experience, so bring the experts to the table. Don't think you have to solve the problem, which is you have people who have solutions. Your key is to engage these people. And then especially the framing, which is framing the crisis well, which is what is the crisis? And what is the challenge, and then how you're going to go about it. So saying, in 2 months I will come back to you, in 2 weeks I will come back to you, etc., etc. Of course, options, which is thinking that you only have one solution, because that solution will probably have limits and fail. So always have inventory of options and list them, so that, and tell people when you decide that you have several options. This was, of course, the worst in terms of Sanofi, which had a very financial, people say it's because of the financial management by the Sanofi board, but basically going to, when you're going for a vaccine, that you're only trying one option. So basically say you have several lines of defense, and we're going to try the first line of defense. But if the first line of defense doesn't hold, we have a second one and a third one. So you sort of calm people down. And then finally, go to step 4, saying, now we're fighting. Let's finish the bullshit. Let's finish the discussion. Tell them that you're going to discuss again, but now it's actually you're fighting the fire. And there should be no confusion that you're actually fighting the fire and how to fight the fire. And keep telling them about the big picture. So that's a little bit what the paper is about. I will not go too much about it. The paper has been circulated, and I hope some of you might do it. Going back to communication, emphasis on clarity. Communication, which is both tell and ask, but be clear communication. Be consistent, which is don't be too biased in terms of too optimistic or too negative. Be open to the fact that you may have to changeability with evidence. And then I think you mentioned this very nicely, Arnaud, which is the culture of the truth, which is I'm going to be true about myself. I'm going to be authentic. So any comment on this? Obvious, useful?
I think it's a very good way to structure, the different steps in crisis management. I think I will not comment on all this, because I think that a lot of things are very interesting and very much in line with what we have experienced through the crisis. One thing which is important is the execution. And I remember at some point I had a meeting with our teams, and I had one slide, and it was 4 letters: JFDI. That was all I was going to say. Just fucking do it.
Yeah.
Because at some point you need to do something.
Yeah.
And you cannot just keep circling and discussing. And
Stop the discussion.
And you're probably going to make wrong decision at some point, but at least it's better than not making any decision.
Yeah.
And I think the execution part of it is really crucial. You need to move forward.
Yeah.
And of course, then you have to adapt as you go along. It won't be perfect first time, but at least you're moving, you're doing something. I think that's very important to learn.
Thank you. And then the model says that be clear that you're now moving into execution. So the discussion is over and we're not going for the best solution, you know, and we're not going to take more time. Yeah, very good. Good. I think that's sort of the summary. Maybe this gives you some ideas, some insights. I'm sure Arnaud has given you a lot of insights as well. So I think, Peter, if we can put the people into their small groups, 2 leading questions. You know, what are the key insights you heard? And please share that. And also, what are the learnings that maybe we didn't talk about that you have experienced? And please share that with the team with the request that when you come back in 15 minutes, we ask you to, you know, put your insights and some of the key learnings that we didn't discuss on the conversation platform, so Muriel can record it. So with this invitation, have a good discussion. What are your insights from today? What are your insights from your own fighting the crisis? And please share that. And then we will be delighted to listen to you when you come back. Arnaud, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Feist asked everyone to put your insights, to share them through the Zoom conference. So we would like to ask you to put your insights from the session, to share your own experiences, and also if you have them action items, you know, based on the input from this session, is there something you will do differently as of tomorrow? We're very interested to know, and we'll share whatever our common experience and common knowledge is with all the participants afterwards. With that, I'd like to thank Arnaud very much for sharing his insights. It was a very interesting session. One thing I wrote down, but it's maybe more of a gimmick, is when the crisis is more or less under control, politics becomes a problem again. So, but I think in your situation, but that's more of a joke. Thank you, Ludo, for your interesting questions for
Well, it came from the audience, you know. It wasn't.
And that was my next one. A lot of very interesting questions. We weren't able to cover them all, unfortunately. It shows that we have a very interactive and interesting debate, but also a very active audience. So thanks a lot for all of those questions. Apologies for those that were not that we were not able to cover. Thank you very much for joining. I hope to see you again next year. And final thank you again to Marielle and the Brussels Airport team for all their help in the organization. To the INSEAD organization team, so a big thank you to Christophe, Dirk, Lionel, Marc, Martine, Muriel, Nicolas, and Yves. And last thank you again to BNP Paribas Fortis Private Banking for their support of our association. I wish you a great evening and hope to see you again next year for hopefully a new physical edition for the 23rd edition then of the Viewpoint event. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much and congrats.
Je suis désolé, j'ai eu que...
Et ben enfin, à bientôt.
Merci beaucoup, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Merci, au revoir.
Très bien le chat. J'ai beaucoup aimé.
Oui.
Ok, on va.